investors. This interview is being disseminated on behalf of Ioneer, and welcome to Stocks to Watch. We're speaking with leaders always shaping the future of energy resources and critical materials. And today I'm joined by Bernard Rowe, Managing Director of Ioneer, which trades on the Australian exchange under INR and on the NASDAQ under IONR. Ioneer is advancing a lithium-boron project in Nevada, right here in the United States, at a time when lithium prices are rebounding and energy storage demand is evolving rapidly. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome you, Bernard, to the show. Always great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Pleasure to be with you.
Yes, and as I mentioned, lithium prices rebounded sharply late last year after a prolonged downturn. So how do you interpret this recent price action, and to what extent do you really think the recovery is being driven by stationary energy storage rather than EV battery demand?
Yeah, I think firstly it was very welcome to see the price rebound that we've been experiencing over the last few months. I mean, basically it's a correction that's happening, and then it's relating to the sort of interplay between supply and demand. So what we saw was that during that prolonged period of low pricing, we saw supply come out of the market around the world, particularly in Australia, but also in China, where operations were being mothballed. And, we've gradually seen strong or continued strong growth in demand. And, EV demand is not uniform around the world. Some parts of the world, the demand continues to grow very strongly, in other parts not so. But overall, there's still good, solid growth in EV demand for batteries. But I think the surprise to everybody has been the energy storage, the battery energy storage solutions. And, the critical role that they play in things like data centers has meant that something that was just, not many years ago was accounted for less than 10% of the lithium market is now closer to 26 or 27% and is increasing strongly and is projected to be a much higher number, like well into the 30s% of the market. So I think you've seen, two things coincide: that overall supply demand correction, and you've seen strong new demand coming from BESS.
Yeah, so speaking of this structural demand shift, if stationary storage is becoming the marginal buyer of lithium, how would you say that really changes the nature of the lithium cycle? Does it really create stronger long-term pricing support compared to previous cycles? Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Yes, I think so, because basically it's adding a lot of additional tons into market demand. So the market is getting larger, and the larger the market gets for lithium, the more likely it is that volatility will be reduced over time. And it also, of course, diversifies so that not all of that lithium is going into one type of battery for a certain purpose. So, there is some lithium that's already used for other industrial purposes, including in the glass industry, but it's, those other uses probably only account for about 10%. The bulk of it, over 60%, has gone into EVs. But, now diversifying that demand across a number of different industries, including static storage, is a good thing for the industry. And certainly we expect to result in more stable prices going forward and larger volumes.
Yeah, certainly optimistic there. And now shifting gears to boron, it tends to get less attention in this whole energy storage discussion, but where do you see boron playing a critical role in the stationary storage ecosystem?
Yeah, you're right there. It doesn't get anywhere near the amount of attention. And I think the fundamental reason for that is there's just so very few large boron deposits anywhere in the world. Really, there's only two producing areas. The United States has one mine, and the rest of the world's boron really comes from Turkey. What sort of role does it play in these energy storage and including the data centers for batteries? It plays a lot of roles. For a start, boron is a material that's used in making semiconductors. So data centers, for example, rely on the use of boron compounds to make their semiconductor chips. It also is used in glass. There's a lot of glass, as you can see behind me. There's a lot of glass that goes into energy storage solutions and data centers. And boron is an integral component to make glass. It makes it harder, tougher, and more heat resistant, and that's very important in these operations. It also is used in insulation, in solar panels that in some cases are being used to drive the energy creation that's going into these static battery storage systems. So it's like often happens with boron, little known about it, but when you start digging, you find that actually it's in many different components and it's an integral component, and there's just very little global supply of this material.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really helpful because as you know, as I said and as you reinforced, it's not talked about enough and it's not doesn't get the attention it deserves, I would say, boron. Um, Shifting gears here, you recently signed an agreement with Empire Southwest to provide equipment, services, and support for the Rhyolite Ridge project. Can you walk us through the scope of that agreement and why it's important to the project's economics or execution risk profile?
Yeah, so some years ago we made a commitment to use autonomous Caterpillar trucks at this mine site in the future. So when we start moving rock around, we'll be having these large, circa 150-ton trucks, which will be autonomous, and they'll be Caterpillar trucks. And the deal that agreement that was announced recently was with the Empire, and they are the service and supplier of those trucks for the region of the United States where our project is in, which, as you know, is in Nevada.
Mhm.
So we've already had a long-term relationship with both Caterpillar and Empire, and this is just the next logical step as we move towards an FID decision and commencement of construction to have these sorts of agreements in place. They will provide the support, including the servicing, for a fleet of Caterpillar trucks, which they will also supply to this site.
So I'm going to make a joke here, Bernard. I could have really used one of those in the US when we had that crazy storm. Maybe consider like a little plow or something like that where I can just send it out and do its thing, my driveway, because oh my gosh, it was a nightmare. As you know, we had that massive snowstorm and ice and oh, it was just so the thought of these, autonomous vehicles, I mean, that's amazing. So, oh, the places you'll go with that. And I also understand you were recently in the United States. I would be very sad if you came to Washington, D.C. and you didn't visit me, but I'm assuming you were probably in Nevada. And let's talk about the purpose of that visit.
So I had a couple of reasons for coming over, and I was there on the 2nd of January, so right at the beginning of the year. And I can assure you it was much cooler in both Nevada and in Washington at that time than it was in Australia. So firstly, I was in DC in
Oh,
Washington for meetings. So sorry, I apologize, but
next time.
um, next time. So I was in DC for meetings with both the government and some of the parties that are involved in our strategic partnering discussions and process. So, the government's been incredibly engaging and offering significant assistance in these areas as critical minerals projects, move from conceptual into actual construction. And so that's the phase that we're at. And so we're talking to both potential partners and we're having the guidance and engagement with the government during that process to help things move along. So that's really important, obviously critical for the project. I was also in Nevada. We had a community meeting. Now, once every 6 months, we host a community meeting in a small rural town of Dyer, which is in the area where the project is located.
Mhm.
We do that so that we make sure we bring along all of the local people in their understanding of what does the development look like? What stage are we up to now? Does anyone have any questions and concerns? And we address those. So we do that every 6 months. So we did one of those. And then I also had some visitors who wanted to come and do a site visit to Rhyolite Ridge. So it took them out as well. So, it was a busy few weeks between DC, Rhyolite Ridge in Nevada, and then back to our office in Reno.
Yeah, certainly sounds like it. So, looking ahead for shareholders and potential investors, what would you say are the key catalysts to watch over in the coming months? And why should investors consider adding Ioneer to their portfolio at this stage?
So we've got a lot of work behind us with this project. Much of the work has been done on Rhyolite Ridge, so the project is ready for construction. So as we look forward in 2026, some of the big catalysts, the biggest catalyst, in fact, for us, a conclusion of a strategic partnering process where we're bringing in one or more, likely to be a consortium of partners, into the project to work alongside us to build. So that's the big catalyst, and we're expecting that in the first half of this year. We will then quickly from that point move into an FID decision, a final investment decision, which the company and its partners will make. That's the sort of the go forward to be able to commence spending and ordering, and the construction work will follow after that. So they're the three big ones: a partner, final investment decision, move into construction.
That's a big one. Bernard, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your perspective on lithium markets. Really enjoyed the boron conversation and, of course, the progress in Nevada. For viewers and investors who want to follow the story, Ioneer trades again on the Australian exchange under INR and the NASDAQ here in the US under IONR. We'll be watching closely as lithium demand evolves and as the company moves towards its next major milestones. So thank you again so much for joining us, and promise next time you're in DC, you'll visit me.
We'll do so. Thank you very much, Ashley.